Around 1970s, when the United States began to see their own oil consumption rise and their own oil drilling slow down. So we start importing more oil from the Middle East. Now, at that time, ladies and gentlemen, we have the oil crisis in the early 1970s. Now, the oil crisis was a man-made crisis. The lack of ability to drill as much as we needed from our own wells made the countries in the Middle East who had all this oil much more important than they had been, much more powerful. When they fought a war in 1973 called the Yom Kippur War with Israel, and we helped Israel, they decided to use that oil as a weapon. It wasn't OPEC per se. People like to demonize OPEC. It was an offshoot of OPEC, I guess you could say, that was the Arab oil-producing countries, and they decided to turn off the spigots as a way to get us to change our policy towards Israel. You know, you stop supporting Israel or no more oil for you. People who can remember those days, remember the long gas lines, remember the skyrocket in gas prices. It was amazing the amount of leverage these dictatorships in the Middle East had over our way of life. The Nixon administration, in power at the time, coined a phrase that they used amongst themselves called petro-blackmail. Okay? This was petro-blackmail. Now, what Nixon had said privately to these countries was, either you turn the spigots back on, or we will internationalize the oil fields. We will parachute troops in there. We will take them over. We will take your oil. We will give you, the going rate for it. We won't rip you off for it. But we're not going to allow you to dictate American foreign policy just because you have a vital resource that we need. It was from this period, ladies and gentlemen, that our whole foreign policy in the Middle East really springs to life. The decision that we will never again be blackmailed for a resource we need. This is when Israel begins getting massive support from the United States. This is when the United States begins courting dictatorships in the Middle East and propping them up like the Shah in Iran and other areas so that we can make sure we have friends in the Middle East who will always give us oil. Now, our support of Israel created, of course, a backlash. In 1979, the Shah in Iran is overthrown, and we lose that vital spot, an ally on the other side of the Middle East from Israel, making Israel even more important. The 80s are a bastion of terrorism involving the PLO and Israel and countries supporting them. The end of the Cold War changes things entirely because many of these tin-plated Arab dictatorial regimes were supported by the Soviet Union. Iraq going into Kuwait was over oil. Our knocking Iraq out of Kuwait was over oil. The situation in Afghanistan is because the people there are fighting us because we're in the region. We're in the region because of oil. If President Bush had said the truth, ladies and gentlemen, and said that we were attacked on 9/11 because we want to maintain military forces in a region that upsets the locals, what would Americans have said? They might have said, let's get out of the region. We're talking about why we have to be in the Middle East, because the oil's so important, right? That's the geopolitical reason we're there. What if we left? Why can't we leave? All right, here's the reason. We can leave. The Middle Eastern countries that are the main oil producers and that make their living off of selling oil have very little else that they sell. They have to sell their oil. It would hurt them almost as much as it would hurt us if they cut off oil to us today. What's more, in 1973, when they cut off oil, when the OPEC subdivision, the Arab countries in OPEC, cut off oil to the Western world, they were a much bigger percentage of the oil suppliers in the world than they are now. Oil's been found in a bunch of other countries. The way that oil is distributed from the world market has also changed. It would be a lot harder for petro-blackmail, as the Nixon administration called it, to work. Okay? Not just that, there are things we could do. It's like Barack Obama was saying that the situation in Afghanistan is fundamental to the defense of our people. Well, it's only fundamental to the defense of our people because we're worried about being attacked again like on 9/11. And the only reason we were attacked on 9/11 is because we're in that region. If we could get out of that region, we wouldn't be attacked again. We wouldn't be a target. I mean, why would the terrorists hate us, ladies and gentlemen, if we weren't there? Now, so what do you say? I mean, you've got this vital oil supply we have to have access to, right? Well, here's what you say. You say that anyone who slaps an embargo on a product that we require in this country for our way of life is done the equivalent of declare war on us. If you slap an oil embargo on the United States, you're at war with the United States. See, we always say that we will go to war in this country to protect our vital interests. But we never go as far as saying what our vital interests are, because that would commit us to going to war in a situation where we would like to have the flexibility of deciding, at the moment. But if you tell these countries, look, we're drawing a line in the sand, oil embargo equals war, well, then you would know if they want to slap an oil embargo on us, we start bombing right away. Full-blown war. When you add to the fact that those countries will hurt themselves if they try to cut off their oil supply, if they even could, the way the market works now, to the fact that we would start bombing, I think petro blackmail's gone at that point. And if you take away the possibility of petro blackmail, you take away the reason we're there to begin with. We're there for oil. If you're going to get the oil anyway, why do you have to spend so much to stay there in lives and in dollars? If you somehow could factor in, ladies and gentlemen, the amount of money that we spend to maintain our ability to access the oil, all the money for all the deployments in the Middle East, all the money we give to states in the Middle East to, maintain goodwill and all that, if you could even put a number on what the lives are worth that we've lost, including the 9/11 lives, and then factor that into the price of oil, something tells me the amount we're paying for oil at the pump is a lot higher than what the pump numbers say. Wouldn't you say? That's the real cost of oil, what it takes to maintain this resource that, we're told requires us to be in that region. Actually, we're not. We're told that they hate our freedoms. But if we're going to be honest about this, the whole reason we're there is oil, okay? Now, let's back up a little bit. What about Israel? Israel is another symptom of this pneumonia the region has over oil. What do you do about Israel? Now, let me just say, my foreign policy ideas are that we're involved in too many countries. And that, like the founding fathers of this country said, when you involve yourself with a lot of alliances, you end up getting embroiled in the hatreds of other countries. The United States might not hate this other ethnic people that the Afghans do, but once we choose sides in the Afghan civil war, now the hatreds of the locals become, our concern and our hatreds. Why are we fighting the Pashtuns in Afghanistan? Because we're allied with the Tajiks and the Uzbeks, right? What do we care about that otherwise? George Washington and some of the other founders wanted us to avoid entangling alliances because then the hatreds of other nations become our hatreds, which brings us back to Israel. Now, I'm a fan of Israel. I've said this many times. There's something almost intoxicating about a people who deserve a homeland, just like the Kurds do. The Kurds are, I believe, the biggest ethnic group without a homeland right now, and the Jews were before then. The Jews deserve a homeland. Now, should it be in the area of Israel? It doesn't matter. It is now. It's a fait accompli, okay? And there's something romantic and attractive about them sort of having a homecoming into the region where their religion and their people were so important for so long. Could that be solved in that region? I think it can be. I think the fact that the United States has our big footprint over that whole thing makes it harder for the locals to come up to sort of a reasonable balance of power. We're like the big kid on the playground that decides to put their arm around another kid, and then, you screw up the whole power relationships, okay? I don't think Israel needs us to maintain their country. I think they've proven over and over and over and over again that they can protect themselves. They've got like the third biggest or fourth biggest software output in the world. They're a high-tech nation and a bastion of low-tech. The Israelis are so competent that it's almost an insult to pretend that we have to be there to protect them when they've proven that, if anything, they're more adept at it for their size than we are ourselves. Now, if you're going to stop supporting Israel, you need to stop supporting the countries around them. You can't, tilt the apple cart all the other way. Countries like Egypt and stuff get a lot of foreign aid from us, too, that they can channel into weapons, or that they can channel into stuff that they put money into, otherwise, and then they can take that money and channel it into weapons. You got to just divest yourself from the region. Okay, you want terrorism to stop attacking you? Get out. I can't get out, damn, we need the oil. We're going to get the oil anyway. Remember, one of the reasons, maybe the reason, maybe the only reason, Japan attacked us in 1941 in Pearl Harbor was because we cut off their oil. We embargoed their oil. We tried to get them to change their policies in China. We said, we're not going to give you any oil. We're going to dry up your war machine if you don't do what we want. The Japanese said, we cannot allow another country to dictate our foreign policy to us, so they attacked us. That's the kind of policy we have to have, folks. We're leaving. Don't attack us because we're not, in your business. But if you cut off our oil, you're basically declaring war on us. There goes petro blackmail. There goes the pneumonia that keeps us wedded to the region. Ladies and gentlemen, you just turn the Middle East into Africa when you